They told me the screaming was just the pressure system adjusting to depth, but metal doesn't beg for mercy. My name is Dr. Elena Vasquez, and 3 months ago, I was recruited for what I believed was a routine deep-sea research expedition. The government promised groundbreaking discoveries in marine biology. What they didn't mention was that some discoveries should stay buried beneath 3 miles of crushing darkness. Welcome back to the Obscuralorevault, where we uncover the stories that were never meant to be told. Today's account will challenge everything you thought you knew about what lurks in the deepest trenches of our oceans. The video you're about to hear is, "The government built a hidden lab in the ocean. I wasn't supposed to survive it." Before I begin, I need you to understand something. This isn't just another horror story. This is a warning. Chapter 1. The Recruitment. It started with a phone call on a Tuesday morning in September. I was reviewing grant applications at the Marine Research Institute when my secretary buzzed in. "Dr. Vasquez, there's a gentleman from the Department of Oceanic Resources on line 2. I'd never heard of that department, but government agencies spawn new divisions faster than algae blooms. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and oddly urgent. "Dr. Vasquez, my name is Agent Morrison. We've been following your work on deep-sea extremophils. We have a proposition that could revolutionize marine biology as we know it." Within 6 hours, I was sitting in a sterile conference room in a building that didn't exist on any map. Morrison sat across from me, flanked by 2 other agents whose names I never learned. The presentation they showed me was unlike anything I'd seen in my 15 years of research. "Project Abyssal Reach," Morrison explained, clicking through slides of what appeared to be a massive underwater facility. "We've established a research station at coordinates that remain classified, approximately 18,000 feet below sea level in the Mariana Trench region." The images were breathtaking, a sprawling complex of interconnected domes and corridors, like a city built for the ocean floor. But something felt wrong about the pictures. The facility looked old, much older than any technology I knew of. "How long has this been operational?" I asked. Morrison's smile never reached his eyes. "That's part of what we need you to determine, Dr. Vasquez. We've encountered some unusual biological specimens down there, organisms that don't fit any known taxonomic classifications." He slid a folder across the table. Inside were photographs that made my stomach churn, creatures that seemed to be part crustacean, part cephalopod, and part something else entirely. Their flesh had an iridescent quality that seemed to shift and writhe even in still photographs. "The previous marine biologist," Morrison paused. "Let's just say he's no longer with the project. We need someone with your expertise to make sense of what we've found." The salary offer was astronomical, more money than I'd see in a decade of university research. But it was the promise of discovery that truly hooked me. The chance to study life forms that existed in conditions previously thought impossible. I signed the contract that evening. I should have asked more questions. I should have wondered why they needed me to sign a life insurance policy that day. Most importantly, I should have asked what happened to Dr. Richards, the marine biologist who came before me. 2 weeks later, I found myself aboard the narrated, a state-of-the-art research submersible unlike anything in civilian hands. The descent to the facility took 4 hours. 4 hours of watching the last traces of sunlight fade into an alien darkness that seemed to have weight. My fellow researchers were an eclectic bunch. Dr. Kim Tanaka, a marine geologist who barely spoke. Marcus Webb, a structural engineer who jumped at every sound the submarine made. And Dr. Sarah Chen, a neurobiologist whose hands shook whenever she thought no one was looking. "First time down?" Chen asked as we passed the 15,000-foot mark. I nodded, watching the depth gauge climb with growing unease. "The pressure down there, it does things to your mind." makes you see things, hear things. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Just remember, not everything you encounter down there is real. The Nereid's external cameras showed nothing but emptiness, until suddenly, impossibly, lights appeared in the distance. The Abyssal Reach facility materialized from the darkness like a deep-sea cathedral, its bioluminescent markers pulsing in patterns that seemed almost organic. As we approached the docking bay, I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The facility's outer hull was covered in what looked like coral formations, but no coral could survive at these depths. The growths pulsed with their own light, and I could swear I saw them moving with purpose. "Don't stare at the formations too long," Webb muttered. "They don't like being watched." The airlock process took 20 minutes. 20 minutes of listening to the facility's strange ambient sounds, a constant low humming punctuated by what sounded like whale songs, but deeper, more complex. When the inner door finally opened, I got my first taste of the station's atmosphere. It smelled wrong. Not just recycled air, but something organic and ancient, like the inside of a shell that had been closed for millennia. Commander Hayes met us at the dock, a career military man whose eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of someone who'd seen too much. His handshake was firm, but I noticed his fingers were stained with what looked like ink. "Welcome to Abyssal Reach, Dr. Vasquez. I trust Morrison briefed you on the sensitivity of our work here." "He mentioned unusual specimens," I replied, trying to ignore the way the corridor walls seemed to pulse with their own rhythm. Hayes's laugh was hollow. "Unusual doesn't begin to cover it. Dr. Vasquez, what we've discovered down here challenges everything we thought we knew about evolution, about the history of life on Earth." The laboratory section of Abyssal Reach was a marvel of engineering. Pressurized specimen tanks lined the walls, each one containing creatures that defied classification. But it was the smell that hit me first. A combination of brine, decay, and something else I couldn't identify. Dr. Chen led me to the first tank. Inside, floating in a solution that glowed with phosphorescent light, was something that had once been human. "We call this one Patient Zero," Chen said, her voice clinically detached. "Found it in the lower levels when we first arrived. Notice the cranial modifications." The skull had been elongated, stretched like taffy, with additional eye sockets that seemed to spiral inward. Gills had developed along the neck, and the fingers had become webbed, tipped with what looked like sharp coral growths. "This is impossible," I whispered. "Human beings can't adapt to deep-sea pressure like this, not without technological assistance." Chen's smile was cold. "That's what we thought too, until we found the others." Tank after tank revealed more horrors, creatures that seemed to be hybrids of human and deep-sea life. Some retained enough human features to be recognizable. Others had been transformed so completely that only dental records could confirm their original species. "How many?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. 47 so far," Chen replied, "and we're still finding more." The final tank was the largest, and it was empty except for a thick, viscous fluid that moved with its own current. As I approached, something brushed against the glass from inside. The fluid swirled, and for a moment I saw what looked like a massive eye, easily the size of a dinner plate, staring back at me. "What the hell is that?" I demanded. Chen's expression grew troubled. "We're not sure. It arrived 2 weeks ago. Commander Hayes found it in the deep excavation site. It's been communicating." As if responding to her words, the fluid in the tank began to churn. The lights in the laboratory flickered, and I heard something that made my skin crawl. A sound like whispers, but underwater. in a language that predated human speech. "It's trying to tell us something," Chen continued, "but every time we try to decode the patterns, members of the research team start having episodes." "What kind of episodes?" "Nightmares, visions. Some of them claim they can understand what it's saying. Dr. Richards, your predecessor, spent his final week here claiming he could hear it calling to him from the depths." The whispers stopped abruptly. The laboratory fell silent except for the background hum of equipment and the distant sound of water under pressure. Chapter 4. The Deep Excavation. The next morning, Commander Hayes took me to the deep excavation site. We descended through a series of maintenance shafts to the very bottom of the facility, where the ocean floor had been carved away to reveal something that shouldn't exist. "How deep does it go?" I asked, staring into the excavated pit. "We've gone down another 300 feet, Hayes replied. "But the structure continues. We estimate it extends at least another 1,000 feet into the seafloor." The structure was clearly artificial, but not built by any human civilization. The walls were covered in symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed directly. The material itself was some kind of coral-like substance, but harder than steel and warm to the touch despite the freezing water. "Radiocarbon dating puts the outer layers at approximately 12,000 years old," Hayes continued, "but the deeper we go, the older it gets. The lowest samples we've taken are, well, they're older than complex life should be." As we descended into the excavation in a specialized lift, I noticed something that made my stomach drop. The walls were covered in what looked like hieroglyphs, but they were moving, shifting, rewriting themselves as we watched. "The symbols," I said. "They're changing." Hayes nodded grimly. "Started happening after we broke through to the inner chambers. Whatever's down there, it knows we're here." The lift stopped at a platform 200 feet down. Below us, the excavation continued into darkness that seemed to absorb our lights. But it was what was on the platform that made me question my sanity. Bodies. Dozens of them, but not human. Not anymore. They were arranged in perfect circles around what looked like an altar made of the same coral-like material as the walls. Each body showed signs of the same transformation I'd seen in the laboratory tanks. "My God," I whispered. "How long have they been here?" "We found them like this," Hayes said. "Perfectly preserved. But here's the thing, Dr. Vasquez. Some of these bodies are wearing modern equipment, dive suits, research gear." I knelt beside one of the bodies. The dive suit was indeed modern, but the nameplate made my blood freeze. Richards, M. Dr. Marcus Richards, the marine biologist who had supposedly left the project. "You said he was no longer with the project," I said, my voice shaking. Hayes's silence was answer enough. Something was moving in the depths of the excavation. Something large. The platform began to vibrate with a low, rhythmic pulsing that seemed to come from the very structure itself. "We need to leave. Now," Hayes said, his military composure finally cracking. As we rose, I looked back down into the excavation. For just a moment, in the shifting shadows, I saw something that my mind still refuses to fully process. Tentacles. Massive, glistening appendages that seemed to stretch up from the deepest parts of the structure, and they were reaching for us. That night I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those symbols shifting on the walls, rearranging themselves into patterns that almost made sense. I found myself in the common area at 3 a.m., staring out of the observation windows into the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. I wasn't alone. Dr. Webb sat at a table across the room, his hands pressed against his temples. He looked up when he heard my footsteps. Can't sleep either? He asked. His voice sounded different, strained. The symbols, I said. I can't stop thinking about them. Webb's laugh was bitter. That's how it starts. First the symbols, then the dreams. Then you start to understand what they're saying. What are they saying? Webb's eyes had a wild look I hadn't seen before. They're instructions, a manual for transformation, for becoming something better. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, but something was wrong with her appearance. Her skin had taken on a grayish tint, and there were what looked like small gills developing along her neck. "You're beginning to understand," she said, her voice carrying an odd harmonic quality. "The process has already started for all of us. The moment we entered this place, we began to change." I backed away from both of them. "This is impossible. Humans can't adapt to deep-sea pressure. Not like this." "Not naturally," Webb agreed, "but they're helping us, guiding the process. We're being invited to join something magnificent." The facility's lights began to strobe in patterns that matched the symbols I'd seen in the excavation. With each flash, I could swear I saw the walls breathing, expanding and contracting like the inside of some massive organism. "Dr. Vasquez," Chen said, her voice now carrying multiple tones, "you can fight it, but the transformation is inevitable. The question is whether you'll embrace it willingly or resist until the process drives you mad." I ran, through corridors that seemed to stretch longer than they should, past observation windows that showed things moving in the darkness outside, things that were definitely not native to our oceans. I reached my quarters and sealed the door, but I could hear them gathering outside, whispering in that harmonic language, the words becoming clearer with each passing hour. They were telling me about the city below, about the ancient ones who built it, about the purpose of the facility and why we had been chosen. The knowledge flowed into my mind like water through a crack in a dam. I began to write. Pages and pages of notes in symbols I didn't recognize, but somehow understood. The history of the deep ones, their patience, their plan to reclaim the oceans, and eventually the surface world. When I finally looked up from my notes, I realized I had been writing for 6 hours straight. And my handwriting had changed. The letters were more fluid, more organic, like the script I'd seen on the walls of the excavation. I stumbled to the mirror and saw what Chen and Webb had already begun to experience. My skin was becoming translucent, revealing networks of veins that pulsed with bioluminescent light. My eyes had developed a second membrane, designed for seeing in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean. By the 4th day, the facility was in chaos. Half the crew had completed their transformation and were no longer recognizable as human. The others had barricaded themselves in various sections, but I could hear them screaming as the change overtook them. I found Commander Hayes in the communications center, frantically trying to send a distress signal to the surface. His transformation was more advanced than mine. His fingers had become elongated and webbed, and his speech came out in bursts of sound that mixed English with something older. "Can't reach surface," he gasped. "Signal blocked by the entity below." The entity. That's what we'd started calling the massive presence in the deepest part of the excavation. It had been there all along, waiting beneath the seafloor for someone to finally break through to its prison. "Hayes," I said, struggling to keep my voice human. "The facility, it wasn't built by the government, was it?" His laugh was a sound no human throat should make. "Built by them. We just found it. Reactivated it. The perfect lure." The horrible truth was becoming clear. The facility had been designed by the Deep Ones centuries ago as a processing center, a place where surface dwellers could be transformed into something suitable for the deep ocean environment. The government had simply stumbled upon it and mistaken it for their own discovery. The specimens in the laboratory, I asked. Previous expeditions, explorers, researchers, all transformed, all recruited. Hayes's voice was becoming less human with each word. Soon, we join the city below, take our place in the deep kingdom. The walls around us began to pulse more violently. Through the observation windows, I could see the ocean itself was changing. Bioluminescent formations were spreading across the seafloor like a vast nervous system. The ancient city was awakening. That's when I saw it, the entity that had been calling to us from the depths. It rose from the excavation like a living mountain, its surface covered in the same coral-like material as the facility walls. But it wasn't coral at all, it was skin. Vast, ancient skin that had been waiting in the darkness for eons. Eyes, thousands of them, each the size of a car, opened along its surface. And in that moment I understood everything. The facility wasn't a research station or a government project. It was a spawning ground, a nursery where the deep ones cultivated new servants for their return to the surface world. The entity spoke to me then, not with words, but with direct transmission of thought and image. I saw the truth of what Earth had been like before humanity. Vast cities beneath the waves, populated by beings that made the specimens in our laboratory look like children's toys. They had been waiting, patient, allowing humanity to develop technology, to explore the deep ocean, to eventually find their way to the ancient facilities. Everything had been planned, every deep-sea exploration, every research project, every government conspiracy, all of it leading to this moment of awakening. The facility began to break apart as the entity rose. Sections that had been connected for months suddenly separated, and the ocean rushed in through cracks that appeared in the walls. But the water didn't behave like water should. It moved with purpose, flowing in patterns that defied physics. I fought against the transformation, using every ounce of my remaining humanity to think clearly. The submarine bay. If I could reach the Nereid, I might be able to escape to the surface. But the corridors were flooded now, and I could see my former colleagues swimming through the water with the grace of creatures born to the deep. Chen appeared in front of me, her transformation complete. What had once been a brilliant neurobiologist was now something that belonged in the deepest trenches. Her voice came from multiple directions at once. "Elena," she said. My name stretched into syllables that hurt to hear. "Why do you resist? The surface world is ending. Join us in the deep kingdom. Be part of something eternal." I pushed past her, my own gills allowing me to breathe the facility's flooded corridors. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was using their gift to escape from them. The submarine bay was partially flooded, but the Nereid was still sealed and functional. I could see other transformed crew members moving through the water around it, but they seemed to be waiting for something, watching. Inside the submarine I found one last horror. The pilot's seat was occupied by Dr. Richards, the real Dr. Richards. He had been there all along, transformed beyond recognition, but still somehow aware. His eyes tracked my movement as I approached. "Elena," he said, his voice a whisper of bubbles. "You can't escape. None of us can. We're all part of it now." I sealed the airlock and began the emergency ascent procedure. The Nereid shot upward through the water column, but I could see them following. Not just the transformed crew, but things from the deep city. Ancient things that had been sleeping for millennia. The ascent was too fast. I should have died from decompression sickness, but my transformed physiology somehow adapted. Through the submarine's cameras, I watched the abyssal reach facility collapse completely as the entity fully emerged from its ancient prison. It was beautiful and terrible, a living cathedral of flesh and coral covered in patterns of light that told the story of Earth's true history. As I watched, I saw it begin to move toward the surface, carrying with it the transformed crew and countless other beings from the deep city. I broke the surface just as the sun was setting, but the ocean around me was wrong. The water glowed with bioluminescent patterns that stretched to the horizon. In the distance, I could see other facilities breaking the surface, installations that had been hidden for decades, all now rising to herald the return of the deep ones. The Coast Guard found me 3 days later, floating in the Nereid off the coast of California. I was the only survivor of what they classified as a deep-sea research accident. The official report stated that the abyssal reach facility had suffered a catastrophic pressure failure. They kept me under observation for weeks, treating me for what they called extreme decompression syndrome. The doctors were baffled by my survival, but they attributed the physical changes to some kind of rapid evolutionary adaptation. They had no other explanation. I've been writing this account for months now, and I know it sounds impossible, but I need you to understand what's coming. The deep ones are returning. The transformation I underwent was just the beginning. Every deep-sea research facility, every underwater installation, every submarine that's gone missing in the past decade, they're all part of the same plan. I still dream about the deep city. I can feel the entity's presence in my mind, calling to me from the ocean's depths. The physical changes have stabilized, but the mental connection remains. I know what they're planning. The government has been in contact with me. They want me to join a new project, something called Operation Deep Reach. They claim it's about understanding what happened at Abyssal Reach, but I know better. They're planning to go back down there. They're planning to make contact. I've tried to warn them. I've tried to explain that the entity isn't just one creature, but a network of consciousness that spans the ocean floor. That every time we explore the deep sea, we're sending signals to something that's been waiting for us to develop the technology to reach it. But they won't listen. They think I'm suffering from some kind of psychological trauma. They don't understand that the transformation isn't just physical, it's mental, spiritual. The deep ones don't just change your body, they change your very essence, your connection to reality itself. I've been documenting everything, every dream, every vision, every moment when I feel the entity's influence growing stronger. Because I know now that my escape wasn't an accident. I was allowed to leave. I was chosen to be a witness, a herald of what's coming. The signs are everywhere if you know how to look for them. Ocean temperatures rising in specific patterns, deep-sea creatures appearing in shallow waters, coastal cities reporting strange lights beneath the waves. The transformation of the oceans has already begun. I estimate we have maybe 6 months before the deep ones make their presence known to the surface world. When that happens, everything will change. The age of humanity's dominance over the earth will end, and the age of the deep kingdom will begin. They're coming for me now. I can hear them in the walls, in the pipes, in the sound of the ocean itself. The entity has been patient, but its patience is running out. I served my purpose as a witness, and now I must serve my purpose as a recruit. If you're listening to this, it means I'm gone. It means I've returned to the deep city to take my place among the transformed. But before I go, I need you to remember something important. The ocean covers 70% of our planet. We've explored less than 5% of it, and in that unexplored 95%, ancient things are stirring. Things that were old when the first fish crawled onto land. Things that have been waiting for us to develop the technology to join them in the deep. Don't go into the ocean at night. Don't accept any government offers for deep-sea research. And if you start dreaming of cities beneath the waves, if you start hearing voices in the sound of running water, if you start seeing symbols that seem to move and change when you're not looking directly at them. Closing. That was the final entry in Dr. Elena Vasquez's journal. 3 days after recording this account, she disappeared from the secure facility where she was being held. The only trace left behind was a pool of seawater in her room and symbols carved into the walls, symbols that seemed to shift and change when viewed under different lighting conditions. The official investigation concluded that Dr. Vasquez had suffered a complete psychological breakdown and had somehow escaped to commit suicide in the ocean, but her body was never found. And the Abyssal Reach facility? According to government records, it never existed. But here's what they don't want you to know. In the past 6 months, there have been 47 reported cases of deep-sea researchers disappearing under mysterious circumstances. Ocean temperatures are rising in patterns that don't match any climate model, and coastal cities around the world are reporting strange bioluminescent phenomena in the waters just offshore. The transformation Dr. Vasquez described isn't just happening to individuals, it's happening to our entire planet. The deep ones are returning, and they're bringing their ancient kingdom with them. So I ask you, when you look out at the ocean, what do you see? Just water? Or do you see something looking back? If you enjoyed today's terrifying journey into the depths of government conspiracy and ancient horror, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Share this story with someone who thinks they're brave enough to handle the truth about what lies beneath our oceans. And remember, the next time you see news about deep-sea exploration or underwater research facilities, ask yourself, are we exploring the ocean? Or is something in the ocean exploring us? Until next time, keep your eyes on the depths, because something down there is keeping its eyes on you.